40% of children have their own tablet by age 2. Have you ever seen a child act like this after their tablet's been taken away?
No! I said no.
On April 3rd, 2010, Apple launched its very first iPad into the world. Since that day, 41 different models have been released, but it only takes one to cause sweeping harm to an entire generation of young kids, because the iPad isn't just a device. It is a doorway to a digital universe designed to capture attention, harvest data, and foster digital dependence. Do we care about our kids? We once had great hope that the next generation would solve the world's hardest problems, but have we doomed them from the very start? This is the full story on how iPads and the internet completely rewrote childhood. 41 iPads, one generation erased.
And now we have the iPad. But while they are great restaurant distractions, what are all those touchscreens doing to all those growing little brains?
And could the impacts be long-lasting?
One of the major medical challenges of our time, internet addiction disorder.
Hi there, my name is Dylan. I'm a full-time software engineer, part-time content creator. By the way, we are halfway to 10,000 subscribers, so please consider helping me and my team out a ton by hitting that subscribe button down below. Back to the video. It was around my birthday, fall of the early 2000s. My father had gotten me this square-shaped gift, and every so often, when I shook it, it would make this little squeaking noise. I had absolutely no idea what could possibly be inside this little square. A few days later, it is finally my birthday. I wake up, I'm so excited. I sprint downstairs, grabbed my gift, and I slowly unwrap it to find out it was a Fleetwood Mac Rumors CD on the inside. The compartment that would hold the CD had a little like circle on it, and for whatever reason, while the CD moved around, it would make this little like squeaking sound. I took this CD with me everywhere. I remember sitting in this little like square in daycare, and built up all around me was this castle, and I had my little like CD player sitting on the floor next to me with my headphones in, and I would just sit there and listen. And I was so content, at peace, and I loved that. I tell you this story because this is what a phone-free childhood looked like. There was play, wonder, and imagination. Now, 2 in 5 children have a tablet by age 2. Generation Alpha is in shambles. Who is Generation Alpha anyways? I was born in the late 90s. My other Gen Z counterparts were born in similar time frames. Millennials were born right before I was. Gen Z was the very first generation to come online. I very distinctly remember a time before smartphones, social media, and the algorithm. Generation Alpha is not so fortunate. Boomers grew up with black and white televisions, landlines, and eventually cars becoming household norms. Gen X had cable TV, Atari, and early personal computers. Millennials had the emergence of the smartphone and early social media. While my generation had smartphones from a pretty young age and high-speed internet. I fall right in between the core demographic of millennial and Gen Z, so my experience growing up was kind of a hybrid of the millennial and Gen Z experience. But Generation Alpha on the other hand, they are the children of millennials born after 2012 and before 2025. 2025 onward is Generation Beta, which are going to be the children of Gen Z. And boy, do I pray to God that Gen Z keeps iPads and the internet as far away from these children as humanly possible. Alpha doesn't remember a before time. In all ways, the online world is just as real to them as the real world is to us. That might sound unnerving to people who grew up without smartphones, but if you're a millennial, you might remember the days where our elders were warning us that the internet was real, and that our online profiles could follow us through college applications or job searches. For better or for worse, alphas are natives of a world to which the rest of us had to adapt.
What are your thoughts on millennials?
I mean, it's pretty fire. I wish I could go back and meet some of my ancestors.
What?
The drip wasn't as good.
What does drip mean?
Like style. Yeah, like if you see me right now, you say a drippier.
If you want to call somebody cool, what would you say? Like,
Probably like mad lit on God or something.
what?
Mad lit on God, no cap.
Nope.
Also, a big difference between iPads and TV is regulation. With TV shows, especially kids' TV shows, everything is checked and proofed. There are strict rules about what content is appropriate or not appropriate for kids. With iPads, apps like YouTube, TikTok, and the like, there are no strict regulations on what kids can or cannot see.
And we call it the iPad.
In 2010, Steve Jobs released to the world their very first iteration of the tablet. He called it the iPad. What started out as a useful tool quickly got out of hand. Today's 13-year-olds are basically a different species. Their parents have shared photos and embarrassing videos of them online since day one. They graduated from iPads to smartphones when they were 8. They know how to contour before you did. They probably know their way around the dark web. And the 7-year-olds, well, they were born in the Trump Brexit years. It would be weird if they weren't bizarre and terribly behaved. Stick around until the end of the video and I will show you exactly how poorly Generation Alpha is behaving. I once lived with someone who had a 2-year-old goddaughter. Occasionally, this wee lass was allowed to play on an iPad. One day, my housemate saw her goddaughter spot a butterfly fluttering outside her window. Her tiny toddler hand reached out, and her thumb and forefinger made a sort of pincer movement. At first, my housemate was baffled, but then she realized her goddaughter was trying to zoom in on a butterfly. This story has stuck with me because, well, it's completely nuts. This kid couldn't feed herself, for God's sakes, and yet had mastered a digital zooming motion. She thought the window or reality itself was a big screen. At the time, I remember a feeling of dread creeping over me, a sense that something terrifying was coming our way. I suddenly realized the human race was breeding and raising iPad kids. What began as a modern babysitter has quickly evolved into the default parenting tool. Loving parents need to communicate 2 basic facts to children. First, you are the center of my world. Second, you are not the center of the world. Gentle parenting communicates the first in a wholly dysfunctional way and fails to communicate the second, because it is premised on the false notion that the correctness or incorrectness of all speech, behavior, and thought is dependent upon personal feelings. Actual parenting, by contrast, requires authoritative clarity about appropriate behavior to which parents, by virtue of their age and experience, have access, and children, by virtue of their youth and inexperience, do not. Moreover, it requires a concept of right and wrong that supersedes mere emotion. When parents become so focused on reaffirming their child's feelings that they completely abandon all guidance or correction at all, they cease being parents and they start becoming merely observers. Gentle parenting blurs the lines between empathy and enabling. It treats every outburst as an opportunity for negotiation rather than instruction, and every boundary as flexible if the child throws a large enough tantrum. The result is a slow erosion of the parent's authority, and the child learns not that some behaviors are unacceptable, but that rules are optional and feelings are paramount. In this way, gentle parenting drifts almost inevitably into permissive parenting, a dynamic where the limits are either absent or inconsistently enforced, and the child becomes accustomed to having the emotional high ground in every single conflict. Permissive parenting doesn't just fail to say no, it fails to mean it. It avoids power struggle not by resolving them, but by retreating from them. Over time, this creates a child just like Generation Alpha, who struggles with frustration, resents structure, and fails to adapt to a world that's ever evolving and doesn't bend exactly in the same ways that their parents did.
Gen Alpha have been raised to believe that they are grown folks, that they can speak to whoever they want, however they want, that violence is the answer. Gen Alpha students are raised in a world that tells them that it's okay to be as nihilistic and individualistic as possible, that they don't have to care about anything or anyone, that they can speak to anybody however they want to speak to them, even though they're only 10, 11, or 12 years old. Most importantly, they are being conditioned to believe that they are immune to consequences, that there are no consequences to their poor behavior, to their rudeness, to their lack of care in completing tasks and doing well in school. They just don't care.
Children raised this way may feel loved, but they rarely feel grounded. And while their emotional expression is validated, their moral compass is never set. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You gave them a tablet that is designed to addict them before they could even speak, and became a permissive parent in the process. Hand a toddler an iPad while you fold laundry. You tap open a creative app. Colors flash, music plays, they're quiet, focused, engaged. It looks like play. It feels like learning. But what if it isn't play at all? A recent study observed nearly 100 preschoolers playing, some with iPads, others with blocks, dolls, or trains. And what they found wasn't subtle. Kids on iPads almost never entered imaginative play. Not once did a child create a pretend story, invent a new game, or reinterpret symbols in a creative way. Their play was mostly exploratory, tapping menus, solving simple puzzles, repeating familiar tasks. They were learning how to use the device, not how to imagine a world. By contrast, when the same kids played with physical toys, their creativity came alive. A plastic plant became a crab. A wet paintbrush turned into a monkey on a wall. A pile of pillows became a castle under siege. They weren't just playing, they were becoming creators. We didn't give them childhoods with a screen. We gave them screens instead of a childhood.
I need everybody else in my generation to promise that we are not going to raise iPad children, them to a restaurant. And I see fellow parents at the table next to me, and their kids have iPads at a restaurant? Can you not make your child behave for more than 5 seconds, that they can live without an iPad for dinner?
As a Gen Z who majored in education for 1 semester and worked in childcare for about 8 or 9 years, I think I speak for many of us when I say that Gen Alpha, or the iPad kid generation, is so far an absolute terrifying nightmare to deal with.
Ryan Lowe is a child and adolescent psychotherapist and spokesperson for the Association of Child Psychotherapists. When she watched the iPad Kid call-out videos, she felt the stirring hope that perhaps Gen Z will be better equipped to parent in the digital age. Most of the points raised in the viral TikToks are valid and well observed. The issue with the screens is not that they are terrible in themselves, but that they are being used as babysitters and to shut up children. This means they're not playing or engaging with the world around them or being included in conversations. The more time kids spend on tablets, the less they engage in the kind of imaginative, open-ended play that builds creativity, problem solving, and emotional intelligence. And once that window closes, once they've grown up tapping instead of pretending, it's not just creativity we lose, it's curiosity, it's empathy, it's the ability to dream. What if the device that kept them quiet also actively kept them from becoming themselves?
Okay, so first I got a comb to comb my hair and some hand sanitizer. And of course it's all pink. Just me and you. Everybody's saying
whole time, then I went to Zara. Also got a purse.
Behavioral and neural development optometrist Bhavin Shah says there are a couple of other really important consequences of iPad use. The first is that more children are becoming short-sighted than ever before. Increased screen time is one of the biggest factors for this. Children under the age of 3 can also pick up underdeveloped fine motor skills and a difficulty in visual spatial awareness, says Shah, because children are used to a 2D world instead of the real one. Basically, we might be raising a fleet of clumsy, myopic tyrants. There's certainly evidence this could be the case, anecdotal as it might be. I have a friend with a kid who watches a lot of YouTube. Let's call him Larry. I met Larry a while back, and the moment I told him that I make YouTube videos, his eyes lit up like he had just met Spider-Man himself. He was starstruck, not because of me, but because I was one step closer to the world that he lives in. Content creators, Skibbity Toilet, the endless stream of faces on a screen. That's who this generation looks up to now. They don't want to be firefighters or doctors or astronauts. They want to be YouTubers. And the numbers back it up. Almost 1/3 of kids today say they want to be a YouTuber when they grow up. Only 11% said astronauts. The stars aren't in the sky anymore. They are in thumbnails. When I was a kid, I got on stage and told a room full of people proudly that I wanted to be, wait for it, a construction worker. I said it with my chest. Hard hat, tool belt, the whole fantasy. That was my dream. Something I could touch, imitate, and feel in the real world and in real life. Larry's version of that? Watching 10 hours of Mr. Beast and trying to go viral by making a TikTok where he's eating glue. Fiona, a Brooklyn 11-year-old, told me over hot chocolate that the amount of time she spends on her phone is very concerning. She's not alone. 38% of teens in a recent Pew survey said they spend too much time on their phones. Over half of children have a smartphone by the age of 11. I can't help but compare this to the Motorola Razr that I got at age 13 that was supposed to be for emergencies only. Unlimited talk, text, and data? Yeah, right. But Fiona said her screen time is nothing compared to the behavior of her 5-year-old sister, Margot, who she says is basically chained to her iPad. It's holding her captive. I want to reinforce here that these are 5-year-olds. It's very easy to get numb to these facts and figures, but I need to remind you that these are developing brains. These are children we are talking about here. But what about your kids? How do you want them to turn out? Or are you also overprotecting them in the real world and underprotecting them online? A full 92% of 8 to 12-year-olds are on social media, according to the survey, and kids this age tend to prefer short-form videos on social platforms to longer movies or shows. That's not just a trend, it's a Trojan horse. The earlier you get a child on a platform, the more likely you've got them for life. And this is not a new playbook. I remember when Juul had first blown up. It was techie, sleek, and way more subtle than cigarettes. But behind that Apple-like branding was something diabolical. It came out that Juul had deliberately marketed their products towards teenagers. Candy-colored pods, mango and creme brulee flavors, viral social campaigns. It wasn't accidental. It was engineered. Internal documents revealed that Juul knew the younger someone started, the more likely they were to become a long-term customer. Not just for a year or two, but for life. I knew kids who had never touched a cigarette but were suddenly fiending for Juuls in between class. Those weren't adults trying to quit smoking. They were freshmen, 14-year-olds. Juul wasn't selling nicotine, they were selling dependence. Because there's a window right between childhood and adolescence where the mind is incredibly pliable. Shape it right then and you've shaped the person. Guess what? Now we're watching the exact same thing play out, but just in a different arena. Social platforms and the internet aren't selling a product. They're selling behavior. Endless swiping, dopamine hits, algorithmic validation, and like Juul, they know. Catch them early and you don't just win a user. You win years of their attention, their habits, and their identity. There's more solid evidence which suggests iPad at home and at restaurants are only the tip of the iceberg. There are mounting signs smart devices at school are causing issues, especially as blended learning and classroom technology has become the norm post-pandemic. Gen Z and millennials use AI to enhance their lives. Gen Alpha is using AI to replace their lives. Going to school every single day and confronting failure is hard. Thinking and writing for yourself is difficult. Copy and pasting questions from your homework into ChatGPT, frictionless. Generation Alpha are losing the ability on how to think critically for themselves. I teach 9 to 12 ELA, and the one thing all grades seem to have in common is a one and done aesthetic. I always give kids a chance to boost their grades with revisions, but less than a third even ever try. Worse yet, I have parents complaining that little Jeff turned in a one-page essay and doesn't have an A. When I show them that Jeff refused to turn in a revision, didn't address the prompt, and had 15 plus spelling errors on a digital assignment, the parents just stare, stone-faced, and say, "But you assigned a one-page essay, and he turned in a one-page essay." Almost every kid tells me they don't go to bed until 1 a.m., but that they're in bed by 9. And more than half show up in their pajamas, wrapped in fleece blankets, clutching their Starbucks and Stanley cups, but leaving everything besides their uncharged laptops at home. Is this going to be our new normal? I did this 10 years ago when I was still in high school. I don't think this is a new normal. I think this is just normal in the modern digital age. Every day, you wake up with a choice between two things. You can become a creator, or you can become a consumer. And unfortunately, it hasn't really been Generation Alpha's choice, but they're being bred for the latter. This is the same generation that wasn't allowed to go to school for multiple years due to the COVID pandemic. In spring 2023, just 56% of American fourth graders were performing on grade level in math, down 69% from 2019, according to just one example of test score data cited in the report. Meanwhile, even the youngest children who were not in school when lockdowns began are showing troubling signs of academic and behavioral delays. We are talking 4 and 5-year-olds who are throwing chairs, biting, and hitting. What a huge mistake that was. Distance learning really f***ed up a lot of kids. We let them do anything for 2 years, and now it's a battle every day. Take your headphones out. It's the start of class. Oh, it's just music. I am well aware, but I'm not going to compete with your music. Take the headphones out, please. No, I don't think I will. Call home later. Mom says, well, he needs his technology so he can be safe. I had a kid the other day. I took his phone and he began playing games on his Chromebook. I locked his Chromebook for not doing the work. And the next thing I see, he's playing games on his Apple Watch. It's a constant battle for their attention. Kids are struggling to read because they simply don't need to learn. They have either been read to or can click a button and have something read to them. Their attention spans are cooked. Unlimited external stimuli, which can be given to them in one press of a button, mere seconds. It's the equivalent of rats being stuck in a cage with a dopamine lever. Kids having digital devices or smartphones nearby is absolutely detrimental to their performance. Researchers found that participants with their phones in another room significantly outperformed those with their phones on the desk. And they also slightly outperformed those participants who had kept their phones in a pocket or bag. It's not that participants were distracted because they were getting notifications on their phones. The mere presence of their smartphone was enough to reduce their cognitive capacity. I need to remind you here that the subjects of this study were adults, let alone children. I can't imagine how much worse these effects are on the developing brain with TikTok in your pocket. The more kids use apps like Instagram and Snapchat, the worse their grades got. But the solution wasn't just less screen time. It was also strong communication with parents that made the biggest difference. Kids who constantly check social media are actually rewiring their brains. Their reward systems become hypersensitive to social approval, likes, comments, validation, making impulse control harder over time. No wonder Generation Alpha is behaving so much worse. I mean, kids beating the shit out of their teacher for taking their phone is wild stuff. I had my MP3 player taken away in high school. I didn't get mad. I got caught. It's the teacher's time. You take the L and you get your item back later. Kids are just severely addicted right now. I don't know why anyone would want to be a teacher today. The real onus here is on the parents. You take the easy way out and allow your children to be fuddling around on a tablet at age 4, and now you wonder, by age 10, they are doing provocative dances on TikTok. A black mirror has become their entire life.
I am so genuinely concerned for this generation of kids, dude. They have zero concept of internet safety. None. Zilch. Nada. And I don't know about you, but I was taught the concept of online stranger danger in school. Like, I don't know, how to not send your personal information to Johnny Minecraft 67. But apparently, that's just gone, because I have had children invite me to their school recitals through my business email. I am begging you guys to just critically think before sending people all of your personal information.
Which brings us to an even scarier reality of modern day.
We're Gen Alpha influencers. Of course we are obsessed with skincare.
We're Gen Alpha influencers. Of course our
favorite stores are Sephora and Ulta. We're Gen Alpha influencers. Of course we wear a headband when we're doing our Get Ready With Me's. We're Gen Alpha influencers. Of course we don't have toys.
Gen Alpha influencers are an absolutely bizarre phenomenon. Kids shouldn't even be able to start consuming social media content until age 16, let alone start posting viral TikToks at age 8. Are we really comfortable letting children onto a social media application that is controlled by the Chinese Communist Party? I'm sure little Timmy is now on Xi's master list. But here's the thing. It isn't about screen time or foreign governments collecting data. It's about what we're teaching our kids to value. When an 8-year-old uploads a video and starts tracking likes, they're not playing, they're performing. Every view becomes a vote on their worth. Every comment, a judgment. We're not just letting them use the platform, we are letting the platform use them. These aren't neutral tools. They're finely tuned machines designed to reward constant output and emotional volatility. And the earlier a kid enters that loop, the more deeply it wires into their sense of identity. Validation isn't coming from parents or peers anymore. It's coming from strangers, algorithms, and engagement stats. We have children growing up in front of a camera, crafting personalities for mass consumption before they've even figured out who they are. And we wonder why anxiety and depression have been rising for decades. In kids who haven't even hit puberty yet, they were never given a space to just be. They were pushed to perform. The law hasn't caught up with the social media age, unfortunately. Child actors on official shows have some protections, not perfect, but at least some guardrails. Kids who are exploited for socials have zero protection. There aren't any rules on how often these kids can film content or if their parents actually have to share the profits with their kids. Instead of asking, "What do I love?" they start asking, "What will get me attention?" funneling them into becoming stone cold raging narcissists by age 13. We are cultivating a narcissistic and apathetic generation of children. Couple that with gentle and permissive parenting, and you've got kids who do whatever they want, whenever they want. Teachers across the country are now openly admitting they're afraid of Gen Alpha students, not in a physical sense, but because of how confrontational, unregulated, and emotionally reactive these kids can be. A 2023 Education Week survey found that 62% of teachers felt their students were significantly less emotionally regulated than kids just 5 years ago, and many trace this back to a shift from gentle parenting into what really is just permissive parenting. Discipline now is seen as a form of harm. Saying no is treated like a form of emotional abuse. They are not reaching minimum developmental standards for their age. Behaviorally speaking, they are out of line. Caretakers and teachers are quitting in droves over their miserable behavior and lack of support at home. There is something seriously wrong with Gen Alpha. It isn't their fault. But to pretend that everything is hunky-dory is just delusional. But the irony is, kids need structure. Most millennials grew up with the classic authoritative boomer parenting style, which often erred on the side of control. But now we reverse the problem. Instead of being told no too often, kids aren't being told no at all. We've raised them in an emotional bubble wrap, where every discomfort is avoided and every outcome is equalized. We praise effort without results. We shelter them from criticism under the guise of protection, but it comes at the cost of grit, of resilience. When kids aren't allowed to fail, they also never learn how to recover. We're building fragile egos, not durable minds. When these kids grow up and hit real-world resistance, rejection, competition, unfair outcomes, they crumble because no one ever taught them that failure is a necessary step to success. In a country like the US, where we really do believe in winners and losers here, they are gonna face emotional turmoil over and over and over again. I'm not talking about how the world should work. I'm talking about the way the world does work. They are less literate than generations before them. They are currently less tech literate than other generations on average. They can't do math on a level they should. They are behaving worse than the generations before them. They are reviving smoking habits by vaping, even after 50 years of anti-smoking campaigns. Their attention spans are abysmal, they are less motivated than previous generations, and the majority want to become internet influencers, not doctors, not firefighters, not astronauts or scientists. They are objectively doing worse than the generations before them. It's not entirely their fault, and there are outliers, but as a whole, Gen Alpha is not doing well. We've seen the damage. We've watched childhoods become content. Play replaced by dopamine loops, and identity outsourced to a comment section. In my mind, there are 3 really good places to start. 1. Tablets are the new pacifier. Hand it to a toddler and the meltdown stops. It's convenient. It works. But at what cost? My aunt runs a daycare and says the difference between the way kids behave now versus 10 to 15 years ago is stark. They're very behind developmentally and emotionally. But we keep handing them tablets anyways. Why? Because it's f***ing convenient. The conversation should not be how much time is acceptable. It really should be, what if we said none for as long as possible? A tablet-free childhood isn't a Luddite fantasy. It's a safeguard for brain development. Let them build a fort out of pillows, not pixels. We know what childhood needs. Why are we giving them the opposite? 2. If phones are hijacking attention, fueling anxiety, and actively disrupting schools, why do kids still have unrestricted access to them? One 2023 study from London School of Economics found that banning phones in schools increased test scores by 6.4% and had an even stronger effect on students from low-income backgrounds. That's like months of additional learning for free, just by removing a device. But most American schools still allow phones during breaks, lunch, or even class. Teachers compete with TikTok for attention. That is a competition the teacher is going to lose every time. We have to ask, is it more important that kids feel connected, or that their parents can contact them during school, or that the kids actually learn when they're at school, the place they go to learn? 3. The internet is the Wild West. We don't let kids drive a car until 16, vote until 18, or drink until 21, but they can upload videos of themselves for public judgment at 8. A 2023 report from Common Sense Media found that teens who use social media more than 3 hours per day face double the risk of poor mental health outcomes, including depression, body image issues, and anxiety. And most teens are on social media way more than that, but we keep handing them keys to platforms engineered for addiction and virality, tools designed for adults, and hardly even adults can handle them, with no training wheels. And when things go sideways, bullying, burnout, suicidal ideation, we act surprised. Isn't it time that we treat social media like every other adult platform? No access till 16, maybe even 18. Fellow Gen Alpha here. I am in 6th grade, and when I say that kids in my class are performing at a 2nd grade level, I mean it. It has come to the point where they don't even know how to tell time on a standard clock. Our teachers have literally dumbed down our curriculum to the point where we just copy stuff that the teacher writes. There is no learning involved. On tests, our teachers literally give us answers if we need help. I am the only person in my class that isn't brain rotted or stupid. The reason why? It was because I was never allowed electronics when I was young. Stay safe, guys. What's the answer? Later access to phones. I would expand that to instant gratification. Whether that's nicotine, porn, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, alcohol, fast fashion, cannabis, video games, gambling, we live in an age of gluttony and consumption, and it's never been easier to get that instant dopamine serotonin boost without actually needing to work for it. Childhood used to be about curiosity. It used to be about that square-shaped disc that would squeak. Now, it's about likes, loops, and viral trends. And the scary part is we handed them the keys. We gave them iPads as toddlers. We let 5th graders post on TikTok. We traded discipline for gentle parenting, and we forgot the fact that boundaries are real love. This isn't just a parenting issue, this is a cultural one. We've normalized overprotecting kids in the real world while completely underprotecting them online. If we don't course correct now, we're not watching just childhood disappear. We're setting the stage for emotional instability, digital dependence, and ultimately, social collapse at scale. And it doesn't stop with kids. iPads reshape your kid's mind. AI is doing the same to yours. Click the video on screen now to watch This Is Your Brain on AI. Quick shout out and thank you to both of my channel members, Jeremy G and John W. I do appreciate your support on the channel. If you're interested in becoming a channel member, click that join, subscribe plus button down below. And outside of that, I will see you in the next one.